Keeping up with the accelerating pace of change and complexity in our world can feel daunting. Fortunately, there are people like global improv consultant and comedy teacher Belina Raffy who can show us how to re-energize how we relate with our teams and bring more joy, creativity, and connection to our organizations. Belina makes the case that practicing improv is the gym to strengthen our ability to deal with complexity. In this conversation, Belina and I discuss the benefits we can derive from practicing applied improv at work and other areas of our lives, improv's triangle model, the distinction between serious and solemn, how to let go of being constrictive and embrace being more expansive, genuine versus toxic positivity, teaching activists stand-up comedy to help them reach and connect with audiences, and the genius of her friend Tolu, and how he devised a program to train CEOs through his office cleaning service. Let's dive in. Belina, welcome to Making Business Art. Thank you so much for being on here today.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And it's been a journey to get to now. I think we touched base first a year or two ago, and it's just great to have you on. And I first heard of you from our mutual friend, Adam Lawrence. And the thing that Adam said to me, he's like, oh, you have to meet Belina. Because when he met you, he said he met you at this conference where he was laughing so hard for days that his face hurt. So I'm like, well, this is really high praise coming from Adam, who's a very funny person himself and a comedian. So I'm very pleased to connect with you today. And before we get into your work life, I'd just like to just touch base and ask you what makes you laugh really hard.
Nice. Well, Adam's one of those people, so he's lovely. I think our own silliness, like my silliness, the world's silliness, there's a lot of opportunity for things that, like, with all of our intentions should be one way, but are another way. And that kind of difference it can be hilarious.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And in terms of specifics, I love Jon Stewart, John Oliver. There was a fabulous lady comedian years ago named Rita Rutner who had a very sort of sweet, delicate humor that I really like. So loads of different funny people.
And how about back when you were a kid? Anything in particular make you laugh really hard?
I mean, I think I've always been a giggler. So, like, I see the delight in life often, and I'm also like really happy to be here, even as a little kid. So yes, when things are unexpected and playful and silly, like when you kind of get that, like the veil lifts and you see that actually the universe has a really funny sense of humor sometimes, that I think that's always delightful, and I've seen it even as a kid.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So here we go with our first question, and so listen to this carefully. So where do you work? And what do you get paid to do?
Where do I work? The world, I think, and the internet. I work for myself, so I have a great boss. And what do I get paid to do? Lots of varied things. Things like helping people build intentionally their improv skills, so that they can collaborate more effectively, they can communicate more effectively. I do this loving form of stand-up comedy, so we can use the lens of humor to help us think more expansively about particularly climate and social issues. I help people who are think very differently to be in the same space together and collaborate. And there's a piece of when organizations want their culture to be more like that, they bring me in to kind of help have different pulses so that can be. So I think that sums it up fairly well.
Yeah. So give me a summary, like what exactly is applied improvisation, which is what you do?
Yeah. Applied improvisation. So it's basically taking the mindset and practice of improv, and it can be musical improv or theater improv. And I actually studied theater improv, but it's to help people learn those skills, but for a non-theatrical application. So it can be to be a better coach or be a better leader or to engage with complexity. I'm doing that actually more and more now, because for me, improv is like the gym for complexity, but it's using those mindsets and skills that have been honed in theater in different applications. And it's also, some people think like in theater you try to create drama and whatever, like that's, life has enough drama and organizations have enough drama. It's not about that. It's actually being more present and connected and generous with each other, and being more expansive, allowing different types of ideas to come in and for us to consider them in our responses to, particularly to unexpected things.
And
how does that?
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit more about, well, what potential benefits might people see who engage in this practice and kind of bring it into work?
Yeah. I think a lot of our stress comes from pretending that things are linear, but seeing that they're not linear and predictable. And so being able to say with a group of your colleagues, we don't know the right answer, but let's think more expansively about what's actually happening now, and find things that feel like wise choices based on that understanding, knowing that we're going to try something, we're going to notice the impact on the system, and then we're going to respond, and it's an iterative process. A huge blessing, and something I got from Keith Johnston, who's one of the granddaddies of improv, is aim for average. Because I think there's so many beautiful perfectionists out there, like, just trying to do their best to, like, get it right. And you can't. Like, in a complex adaptive system, you can't get the perfect answer. You can't, like, a lot of the things that are happening, we've never dealt with these situations before. Climate change and societal breakdown and all sorts of different things. Like, we've never engaged with now before. And having those improv skills helps us treat ourselves more gently. Like, instead of beating your, like, why aren't I doing it properly? Or wanting to hold back until you have all the information, that can also be unhelpful. And always being stuck in doing mode instead of, like, stepping back into reflection mode. So there's lots of different blessings that applied improv can actually give people. It just sort of depends on where their struggle is, because it kind of flows like a river into the bits that need the expansion, the softness.
Yeah, this is reminding me of a conversation I had not too long ago where we were just a business conversation, going back and forth with somebody who wanted to find the answer. And this just bubbled out of me. I don't know where from, but I decided I'm going to keep using it. I said, there is no answer. Yeah. So we're not going to find the answer. We're going to create the answer. And that's what the type of work that I do. This is what this work is for. We're co-creating the answer with others. We're not going to find anything. Yeah. And I remember the person's face, that landed, and I think it was kind of like a stick of dynamite. Landed in his brain or something, but his face just changed, and it was something clicked or did something, but I think the person, like, his energy shifted, and I wonder if he thought about that anymore after the call, but I think it changed there was some change of energy that I can't say that I really read what the energy was, and do we really read energy at the end of the day, but it just seemed to diffuse some of the anxiety of finding the answer to a state maybe that was more reflective in some way. Or maybe he was just trying to process what I said to digest that.
I mean, it's such a different way of thinking from school, where we're like, there's one right answer and you have to get that. And there's a lot of pressure on you to be a straight A student to get that answer, that one answer. And then those people go into positions of power, do you know what I mean, to replicate the system. And so it's a huge shift when people try to think about, there's many answers, and actually stepping back, noticing more about the system, like, all of this different stuff is so necessary. Because I think even now, I'm working with a bunch of organizations that do sustainable development and humanitarian stuff, and they're all so stressed out. And it's almost worse if your organization is doing something good for the planet, because things are harder. And I'm seeing people getting so much more, like, no reflection time, close to burnout, like, very little self-care, very little support for self-care, or very little, like, apparently there's a good, like, oh, you should take some time off, but the leaders never model it. So it's sort of like, where does that, like, leave us? And improv is, one description I really love is by Robert Poynton of what are the core capabilities of improv. He has a really lovely triangle model of let go, notice more, use everything. And I think that's such an elegant description of what we're doing when we improvise. So let go of ideas or behaviors that aren't serving us in the moment. Notice more, including what you need to let go of, but notice about your resources, about your state of being, about your partner's state of being, what's around you, and use everything. And I like to think of that, use everything that's, like, of service of what you're there to do. And just kind of going around that loop, I think, is really powerful for organizations and people in the world at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like I practice design thinking, service design, human-centered design, whatever you want to label it. And I do notice when that is practiced well on the facilitation side and then also on the participant side, I've noticed over time that is really, it's much less about the exercises, although the exercises have a role, but it's much more about being, it's like a way of being. So can we dig a little bit deeper into in what ways does practicing improv change people? Yeah. What's your take or observation on that?
I first got into improv to teach out there because I really needed it. And I had a huge Be Perfect driver, and I worked for a bank in the back office, and it was really stressful, but I wanted to get everything right. And one of the things I noticed is that when we first gravitate to the thing that we think should be out there, if we don't get, actually, I really need this in here, do you know what I mean, inside, we get frozen. And I was on the board of the Applied Improv Network for 6 years, and I chaired co-chaired a lot of their international conferences, and I saw loads of beautiful people, and a few of them would get frozen like that. So they'd be teachers on status, but they're never not high status. Okay, so there could be a stuckness there. So I think one of the things is how do you pull it into your life and realize that's the kind of the game that your soul is up to, of projecting and then sort of bringing it in. And so one of my master classes for applied improv was I let go of having a home completely, and I had built a route, because all the way around the world at teaching applied improv, but improvising my life as I was doing that. And that was my master class to pull it in. So I think it's the improv is fractal, and our need to do it is everywhere. And so if I work with an organization, I did something recently on collaboration, improv and collaboration for an organization. But what's lovely is if you do it in the context of work, that same skill is useful at home with your partner or your children, and it's useful if you encounter unprecedented weather. So there's something about that let go, notice more, use everything, which when you intentionally practice, you can see the need for it, and you can see the opportunity to practice it everywhere. And that's really lovely and powerful, because it's such a beautiful complement to the planning and the control, because we still need to do that in areas of our lives. We still have annual taxes to do and things like that. We still have certain things that fall in that system, and we can't pretend that's the only game in town. I think that's so improv, for me, is a compliment.
You mentioned that you've taught this around the world, and I'm curious to hear from you. What do you find around the world that's universal or different? So what's different in different parts of the world, and how is improv received in different places?
And there's something very universal about it, because I think sort of nature improvises, and in every culture there's something that it's oh yeah, we do that in this realm or something. I had a beautiful response. I was teaching social entrepreneurs and journalists in Bhutan, a service design and improv workshop and a communication storytelling workshop for climate. And after the workshop, one of them gave me my favorite responses was, let go, very Buddhist. And he sort of walked away. And there's something culturally, I think the desire to connect with people in ways that honor who we really are when we don't have all these masks on is huge. And there's only one culture that I find amusingly difficult to do it in, and it is absolutely possible. I think maybe I just don't have the makeup for it. So I've worked in Iran and Japan and Germany and UK and all these different places, and I'm actually half French, and I find France the hardest group to work with for whatever reason. It's oh man, I don't know if it's the education system, because people are oh, in Germany it must be really hard. I'm no, they get they're as long as they can sort of see the relevance of the
Mm.
experience
Mm.
to their work, they're
Mm.
really open to it. But there's something about France that I haven't quite worked out how to crack it yet, despite my experience. There's something like
Mm.
hyper logical of there's business and there's art and there's no connecting the two, and yeah,
Oh, that's so
can't quite
interesting.
work that out yet.
Well, I was curious if you detected any differences in, just to be crass about it, like East and West, like in societies where there's more collectivism versus
Oh
society
yeah,
where
yeah.
there's more individualism. Do you notice any differences between those two categories?
I've played, I've done what I do in both. Sometimes with certain education systems, when they're taught that they're strongly that there's one right answer, me holding a space to invite what do we co-create together as the wisdom in the room, that can be unsettling, and then we can talk about it and have a conversation, and then I know that for those groups, like, bring in precedent of like using improv, or bring in the fact that like most top MBA schools teach their MBAs that, or like something to give them the confidence that actually this is worthwhile in trying. With individualism, it's funny, like, what is the A type, B type? Like, there's a personality type that's more collaborative, and there's a
Mm.
personality type that's like I'm gonna screw the system for everything we get, and it's hard to bring those two together because
Mm.
I think improv is really a B game, where it's a collaborative game, and when we're building those skills, it's hard to incorporate somebody who's really in it for themselves. I think that's one of the tricky bits. But even in individualistic, there's something lovely in just connecting with people in a
Mhm.
nurturing way.
Mhm.
And that's where I see people who, in kind of more individualistic societies, they just like, it's like, I can relax for like for an hour. Like, it's not all about me. And
Mm.
actually leaders who bring it in, if they can get to that point where this is truly empowering, instead of like, let's have a fun day out and then I'll tell them what to do as we go, like when they come back. If you can get a leader to shift to just hearing some of the beautiful ideas that their colleagues come up with when they don't interfere, when the leader doesn't interfere, then it's like, I don't need to do everything all the time. Like, I can actually let the wisdom of the room lift me and respond to what's happening. Yeah, sorry, that was my babbling,
Yeah. Oh,
babbling around
thank
that.
you.
Does that?
Yeah. So we've talked about all of this more in the abstract. Do you remember a time when you kind of saw improv like really land within a team or within a person and make some positive difference within a team, or for even for just a leader?
A lot. Yeah. Like, I'm thinking of, thank you for the question. I'm thinking of a particular thing where I worked with a bunch of leaders for a sustainable development organization as part of a leadership camp,
Mm.
and doing improv because they want to, as a group, as an organization, want to embrace complexity better. And I was kind of slotted in to do improv stuff. But then one of the ladies from that said, we're doing actually a deep dive on complexity. Can you do half a day here?
Mm.
And at the end of it, she's like, wow. She's like, improv is the gym for complexity, and in a
Mhm.
way that she had never gotten before,
Mhm.
and in a way that I actually hadn't articulated in that same way until I was put in that situation.
Mhm.
And basically, what I had them do was think about a wicked issue and write it down that their organization at the moment is treating as simple or complicated, but it's actually complex. Write it down, put it in your back pocket. And then we did a bunch of improv. And after each improv game, it's like, what do you see? How might that inform that experience that you just had, inform your wicked issue? What do you see now? And at the end of that, they were really amazed at, like,
Mhm.
wow, like their responses could be so coming from such a different place. They could
Mhm.
see different possibilities. So that was one example.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I'm starting to explore complexity, and what I see is I'm encountering a lot of very cerebral takes in writings, and it's a lot up here. And
Yeah.
the kernels, the birth and evolution of this project, making business art, is just really recognizing the obvious, which is that we need to be moved emotionally,
Yeah.
and be moved emotionally to then be moved into action. And I notice we can see in public discourse, there are people who like to show charts and graphs and wag the finger at people and shame people. And I don't think that's very successful I don't see that being successful in getting people to think and act and change. I think that's successful at encouraging polarization. And on the other side of that spectrum, there are people who, the propagandists who will make up anything, but they do that in a way that pushes emotional buttons that do get people to act, often against their interest, their long-term interest in many ways.
Yeah.
And
even short-term,
but then the people who operate in that way, they're very cognizant. They're brilliant psychologists in a way, because they know that they have to move people emotionally. It just happens to be outrage instead of the work that you do and cultivate. And the complexity people, I don't think I haven't come across something that is really touching human hearts yet. It's just very cerebral, and I think that has its own shortcomings. And I think teams that can integrate what you do into complexity type of work, I think would probably do a lot better.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend sort of two, because I'm starting to collaborate with two different groups who have been working in the complexity space for a long time and with great heart. And it's about, like, how do we not just be stuck it up here, but how do we shift to wise action as needed? And one of them is Glenda Yoyang, who's awesome, and she's part of something called Human Systems Dynamics Institute. And she and I are sort of, she's just attended the sustainable stand-up, which is like really nice. And so we're having these lovely conversations about, like, what's the relationship between comedy and complexity and wise action and all of these different things. And there's a lady named Nora Murphy Johnson who has her own organization but has worked with Glenda, and she's looking at how do we monitor and evaluate complex projects in a way that honors them instead of doesn't force them to try to, like, fill out the spreadsheet that's very linear, that doesn't really apply or show the extreme benefit of a complex project. And so those two and I are kind of playing in the space of, like, how do we change the games for, like, nature-based projects that do amazing things but don't fit into a linear application for funding that was written by a lovely person from PwC who's never been in a field, you know what I mean? Like, so how do we align some of this stuff using improv and this complexity? Yeah,
sure. Well, I think this is a good segue to talk about something I'd really like to pick your brain about, and that is the topic of solemnity. So business settings, as I'm sure you have experienced, as have I, and probably most of the people listening to this, so business setting can be very solemn. And so what's your take on the role of solemnity in business environments? Why do you think it's there?
Yeah. Well, I hope you include, for your listeners, I love the thing by John Cleese that you sent me on Serious and Solemn. And it's so good. Like, I'd never seen that before. And for years, I have been putting up either a flip chart or a slide that says, serious does not equal solemn. That we can actually have a really good time working on serious stuff. And there can be joy in it, and there can be expansiveness in it, and there can be laughter in it. So I love that, what you sent me. And I don't know where it comes from, and it doesn't feel helpful, and it especially doesn't feel helpful. Like, you have to pick your moment. Like, if somebody is on fire angry, or somebody is on fire in pain, there's a gentleness to hold that. There's a gentleness to be with that. And there's a timing of, at some point, beautiful laughter might shift things. And it depends on the type of humor too. Like, so I've been teaching my sustainable stand-up for like 9 years now, for many years if we're trying to make timeless, but for many years now, and around the world and across 11 countries and over 50 times. And it's an interesting thing for it. It's an invitation for real positivity about dark things and heavy things. And how do we have the lens of comedy illuminated by love instead of by fear. So our responses, if we respond to them with fear, have a certain trajectory. If we illuminate what we're trying to do with love and with playfulness and with humor, we actually see different possibility, which changes the range of what our actions can be. Yeah. So I think it's...
Well, let's dig into this a little bit, and let's just do the best we can here. It's not about the ultimate, the absolute right answer. It's just our interpretation and experiences of these concepts. How might you distinguish solemn and serious?
My sort of energetic experience of solemn is like you can't tune into joy in this moment. And there's a shutting down and there's a constrictive energy to it, solemn. And that, for me, it can feel like it's different from people being genuinely sad or genuinely in grief or like there's something almost imposed, like I should be responding in this way because I can't feel it, because it's not appropriate to feel joy or something. And serious is just, doesn't matter. Like, does it make the world better? Does it make your life better? Does it bring you ease or does it bring you joy? Like, all of those can actually be serious. Like, I think that's what I'm worrying about with all of the people who are doing kind of the save the world work, who are almost in burnout, is they're taking it so seriously, but in a way that's like destroying their bodies, in a way that's not is not sustainable in the long run. And these are the people like we need in their jobs doing the good stuff that they're doing. And I feel like it's the system there's a feedback loop of like, we're using taxpayer money to make the world a better place, so you better do this right, you better do it perfectly, and I feel like that's burning everybody out because we don't know what perfect looks like. Of course we care, but we also need to care about ourselves and give ourselves space so we have spaciousness to greet the heavy stuff that we're working with.
It's confusing, the way I process it, when we say, well, somebody's taking this too seriously.
Yeah.
I'm a person, I'll come out here and admit this, I take things way too seriously. But, and I'm trying to, and I've also been a person that's very cerebral. So I really do the exercise, the practice of practicing to be more heart-centered and have awareness around that and kind of live more in the heart than in the head and kind of have a balance. But I think that's where, when we say, oh, you're taking it too seriously, I think then we cross streams, we mix solemnity with seriousness. And I think when we might say, like when you said right now as an example, like, oh, they take things very seriously, I think there's elements of anger, like we're angry. And I think that anger comes from, in the case of, I think, activists, is they see the possibility of a future that some people are not embracing. And I think that makes them angry or disappointed first, and that kind of festers into anger, etc. Yeah, so for listeners, Belina has been referencing a clip you can find in YouTube. Go to YouTube and search John Cleese and then just solemn, and then you'll find it. It's about a couple of minutes. So in John Cleese, in his case, he argues that, or he thinks solemnity serves just ego, and it's kind of like a shield to shield, people's egotism within organizations. And usually that would be people in leadership mostly, or team dynamics as well. And that, I don't know, that there's a whole process for me. So I grew up in South America, in Ecuador, and I went to a Catholic school that was very serious, but really very solemn, right? And so the education there is like, it's kind of militaristic. Is you get to school, you march on Mondays, you sing the national anthem, and you can't express any joy, and you have to follow rules, and you have to conform. And it can be very asphyxiating for at least for more sensitive people like me. I reflect back on that time, and I'm like, what was really the purpose of that? other than entraining people to just kind of conform and follow. And John Cleese in this clip talks about going to funerals, basically, where there was levity and laughter and celebration, and that was very cathartic. So anyway, this is like a topic that is present in my mind, and I even apply to myself when I'm making something and I want to look good in some way. That's so solemn. It's not serious.
Yeah.
So it's even for myself, I try to do that have the practice having the awareness of is this serious or solemn.
I love that, and I love your sort of confession of where it shows up. Like I definitely have it around the humor, which is just like ironic. I so feel that the work that I'm doing in this particular course with the humor and the climate, and that it's healing, that it's healing what stand-up means in the world, even because I've had so many people from the audiences come up to me and say, I don't usually like stand-up comedy, but that was amazing because it felt great and we were all in it together. But when people sort of, I don't know, like push back in unexpected ways or weird ways, I get really serious instead of playful. That's actually one of the things I love from Glenda Yoyang. She was saying one of her practices is, how do we shift from judgment to inquiry? To curiosity? Like, how do we sit in the curiosity of like, how is any pushback a gift? Like, what's a beautiful question that can illuminate? And she also talks about when there's difference in the system, that gives you energy. And I had an interesting pushback of like, yeah, but your comedy class doesn't give us the solution to the sustainable issue. And it felt like it was coming out of left field. But two, it's like, but we're changing what we even perceive the landscape of the issue to be. And from there, if we respond, it's a totally different type of solution that feels much more anchored. Like, it was just, it was very interesting. And the gift of it was like, boy, it's given me a lot of energy to like write blogs and stuff about it and to make it more clear. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I'm also thinking like, how do I be playful in that response too? How do I not shift into my head and let me tell you 5 reasons why? Like, it's like, no, how can I illuminate that with my heart and with my soul, and kind of how can I use it as a playful invitation to be expansive instead of trying to be constrictive.
Yeah, absolutely. This story is coming up for me, and it's 2 stories that actually I'll tell you. So I did about a year and a half of high school in Ecuador, and back then we were using typewriters. Remember those? And so I think this was like 9th grade, and so you had to like type your assignment. But you could not submit your typed assignment, if you had used any whiteout, because if the teacher saw that, she would give you a 0 and just throw it in the trash.
Oh wow!
Years later, in the United States, I went to this crazy undergrad that had like no grades, and you designed your own education with some guardrails. It was really hard school, and I remember I submitted my first essay to one of the professors in the class, and I put it in this little binder, this little report cover. And she called me into class next time, and she told me, like, do not ever give me something in a report cover. This is just a distraction. I just want a really good paper. And then I noticed that there were classmates that submitted, they used like recycled paper. So they would just take an old assignment or essay, just exit out and just print on the blank side. Right. In fact, some of them, even the papers had like a footprint on it. So it had just been lying on the floor. And the professor had no qualms with that. She would just really care about the ideas of what was expressed in these essays. And I think like, wow, that's such a contrast of, I think that is serious. You just really want to get good ideas versus the solemnity of like, oh, well, this has whiteout and therefore the content doesn't matter at all. You're just going to throw it out. And I'll tell you, I was just in Ecuador earlier this year, and I was helping some family with errands, and we went to this bank. And so my relative filled out like the thing, this form at the bank, and just like the date had just like, you make a 4, but it's really a 9. You just kind of correct something. And the teller said like, oh no, this date is just not perfect, so we need to fill out another form. And so that shows you the... And it just blew my mind. I was like, really? We're going to spend the time and the paper and really? Is this really necessary? It's like such a barrier to getting something done, like in that moment. Yeah. Anyway, so I think about this a lot. Not just this distinction. I just find it fascinating. Yeah.
And you brought up an interesting point. Pushback. Oh, you're so serious. it's almost by people who don't want to consider the topic of the serious thing. There's a fabulous lady from Australia who said, like, she's working in sustainability, and if you're working in sustainability, you will be morally inconsistent, like, but you're trying. Do you know what I mean? Because like, and she said this guy came up to her and she's like, "Oh, you're vegetarian, but you have leather shoes," and she's like, but at least I'm trying. Like, is it better that you don't try at all and are morally consistent but immoral? And like, so there's something weird about that. Of like, people are attacked and shamed for caring about the right things.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, because it's almost like the system or that type part of the system doesn't actually want you to sit in those. But at the same time, people who really care about ideas, certain things, alienate potential allies by shouting at them. And that's a bit of the activist of love your audience. Don't, like, they're potential people to be in it with you. Why? And for me, with the climate activists, I don't think they get that if you shine hate to other people, why on earth would they ever help you to do what you're doing? Because they perceive that you hate them, and that if you had the power to change the world, you wouldn't save them. So we need to be in it together. We need a different dynamic to express what we care about, but also to
Well, I mean, there's like strong streaks of self-righteousness in some of those ways of being, which then come back to solemnity, right? You're being solemn if you're being self-righteous. As somebody who can be very self-righteous and thereby solemn, I'll own up to that. But shifting gears, there's another phenomena that has bubbled up in the press in the last year or two, which is this notion of like forced fun or manufactured fun at the workplace. And this reminds me of when I was finishing MBA, one of the consulting firms who was at the grad school recruiting, they were very well known for having these happy hours and sporting events and all these after hours things that were not forced, but if you weren't at them, it might be hard for you to get a promotion and progress and stick around the organization. So it's not necessarily voluntary. What's your take on forced fun, and how can teams or organizations not fall into this?
Yeah. There's such a difference, and I think we can all perceive it, between positivity and toxic positivity. Is that force it, like, let's slap a smile on this pain, basically. That genuine positivity, for me, one of the difference, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. My experience of it is there's a lot of things we could tune into, excuse me, that are happening in the world. And having a practice of tuning into things that we're grateful for, and having a practice of tuning into the seeds of things that are moving in the direction that we want, instead of always focusing on the problem and the barriers and the gaps and all of that. So that practice of genuinely noticing, expanding what we notice to positive things that are helping us, is really useful, because it can relax us often enough to take on board like a useful action in the direction of mitigating whatever it is. That's different from, let's force ourselves to laugh at something where there's real pain there, where it's not, you can't do it with an active wound. And actually I had a beautiful lady who was in part of the States, and she was a mayor of a small town, and she was running on like a liberal ticket, and she was trying to do great things for the environment. And she had death threats in the United States, and she had right-wing people show up at her office and try to kidnap her. So she was, understandably, that was an active wound, and she was pushing back like, but is this stuff funny? And I'm like, actually, that stuff, no, it's not. Like, please don't apply our comedy class to an active trauma wound, because you need to heal from that. That's different. What we're trying to do is, for stuff that's not so on fire, can we find bright spots and stuff that feels heavy? That's a different process than active trauma wounds.
Yeah.
So I also find, I don't know if it's just, I've just been horribly unlucky with the laughter yoga people that I've met, but they always like, I want to give them a wide berth because there's something like the few that I've met have had that energy of my life is. Am I allowed to swear on your podcast, or would you prefer me not to?
Right.
My life is a wreck, but I'm forcing the laughs out there because I need it in here. It's that same dynamic that we were talking about earlier. And like that just happens to be the two yoga laughter people that I've met. Is like it had that feeling, and it made me like go, ooh, this is not. It's beautiful when it's coming from a genuine place.
Yeah.
It's a different animal when it's not.
Yeah, it's a form of bypassing.
Yeah.
For me, an unlock has been gratitude. And this is, so I'll tell you, it's gonna sound super cheesy and hokey, but it changes my energy. Sometimes if I'm just having a really hard time in terms of mood and emotion and thoughts, I'll just start with just breathing. I'm like, I can breathe unassisted, and that's a great thing. And actually, my grandma passed away it's almost a couple of months ago from pneumonia. And so, and she had oxygen on, etc. So it's like legitimate. Oh, you can breathe unassisted. Your body's working. You can go. It's gonna sound crass, but you can go to the bathroom. Like your body's working.
Yeah.
If you have hands, like whatever's working, like if you're in a comfortable bed, like whatever is the smallest unit of things that you take for granted, you start to just be grateful for it. And I find that really shifts my energy without bypassing stuff that is challenging. It's like that's there, but then I can appreciate these other things that are working right now and be very grateful for that. And as I've practiced that over time, that's just really grown. And now it's really become, I don't want to say a tool, but a practice where I can shift my energy more reliably into a better place if I'm experiencing difficulty. But yeah, I agree. I've been in a couple of workshops where there's been some element of laughter yoga, and I didn't connect with that either.
Yeah. I think there's probably like great practitioners out there that we haven't met yet. It's gotta be genuine. And we really can feel the difference. I think.
I think just quickly reconnecting back to the solemnity is what you're saying. It's the genuine shared laughter is where the magic's at, because laughter also has a polarity and a dark side, so it can be used to humiliate and offend and attack others. Right. I remember
humor can,
I remember one time in high school that was here in the States, I overheard these two young ladies talking, and somebody was telling the other one like, oh, look at that person and just look at them and laugh. And I was just like, this is whatever, 30 something years later, I still remember that moment because it really landed on me emotionally. I was first like, why would you do, like it would not cross my mind to do that. And it took me some time to understand, oh, that's some kind of psychological warfare among these people. So laughter can be also very cruel. And that's a frame where I can see the solemnity being like a shield at times. But what you do is really about genuine shared laughter and like hilarity, like real hilarity, and laughing at ourselves, which I love that you shared that at the top. Our friend Adam, again, I saw a social media post where he posted something he overheard about people complaining about political correctness and that they couldn't laugh at minorities anymore, and that then what was there left to laugh at. And I remember I just read that. I was like, wow. And I think I replied something about, gosh, there's so much that we can laugh about ourselves and our own foibles and idiosyncrasies. Like, I'm ridiculous. Listen, like if I really start looking at all the bullshit I do, it's just absurd. And there's just so much to laugh about just in that and so many other things. But yeah, some people are just really kind of tuned to that energy of just bullying, and which is sad because it says a lot about an absence, something really missing in them if they're like so externally focused in that way. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any reaction to that.
Well, I have sort of 4 pillars to the stand-up course that I do. And I really find we learn things in 3s, and I talk about the rule of 3 all the time, but for whatever reason, this is a 4. And it's, I love myself. I love the audience. The system is silly. Here's what would be awesome. And even though, like you say, that like there's a lot of things like in there in yourself that is silly. Like I find that when we share that with great compassion and love to ourselves, it comes out in a completely different way. It's sort of like, how do we not notice that bullying energy out there and put it inside? But it's like, how do we just like, bye, see you later? Like, how do we not engage with it at all? And when we're nervous, we tend to go negative. And the improv practice is a really lovely practice to at least be neutral positive. And that's part of why in the stand-up class I also teach improv mindsets, but then we still write and refine and stuff. But the sponsoring energy is so important. Of so many times when people say they'll leak, oh, this thing I don't like about myself or whatever, and in early parts of the course, and I'm like, well, how's that a superpower? And the stuff that they find, like when it's like, how is dyslexia, or how is being part Mexican, part Swedish, was one guy's journey. And it was very interesting. Like, how is the bit that you're trying to hide actually a beautiful gift to the world when you hold it with that? Because that tends to be a very rich, expansive place to be, and a gift for the world, because we all have stuff that we're like, I don't want to show this, and I want people to see. But it's, if we can get there first with love and share it with the world, it's like, yeah,
absolutely.
It opens up some good stuff.
Well, Belina, I'd like to just get in the time machine and take some steps back into your life journey and land way back, some years back, when you started your career working at a big global bank. Talk about solemn place.
Yes.
So how did you start to make your journey from this traditional job at a big global bank to working with applied improv and comedy like you do now?
Yeah. So that was in New York City, and I moved there. I didn't really know anybody, and there were some lovely people at work, but the system was very serious and solemn. It was solemn, but like the stuff, it wasn't making the world a better place. Like it was just like a regular commercial bank. And I needed a way to play with people. And intuitively, I kind of did an improv class and I did a stand-up class. And the stand-up I did because I just love playing with people, making people laugh. And the improv just felt so good because I'd grown up. I lived in 9 different places and 3 different countries before I was 4 or something like that. Like I moved around a lot, and it wasn't just what city are we in. It's like what language is everyone speaking? What culture is everybody? So I had to I grew up improvising to connect quickly with people, and so there was something really lovely about the improv that actually made my boring, stressful job easier. And I didn't understand why until I sort of consciously studied it more in the applied piece of it. But there's something about, we're playing by rules of a game, and some of the rules are silly. And some of the things that we agree on is how we interact together or how do we get stuff done is actually not helpful. Like it's putting too much stress on us. And I was on stress leave for months at a time because my back office job, we did the Euro conversion and then we did Y2K compliance. So we had 4 out of 5 managers on stress leave for months at a time. Like it was horrendous. And I came back going, there's got to be a better way than that for organizations to get stuff done. And so I did an MBA to relax.
To relax.
That was my... yeah, to relax. It seemed a lot more... I did an MBA to relax, just to step back and kind of do something that on the outside was like, oh, that's a good move. But I just needed a space to kind of rethink and And even my MBA was like a really traditional MBA, and we had lots of people from an army officer academy there that thought their connection with women was kind of from the 1950s. It was a very surreal. I was one of 2 Americans, and in British culture, if they like you, they tease you. But if you have 200 people teasing you, it feels like you're under attack. It was a really interesting learning experience. But I started consciously looking at metaphor and what if instead of business is war or business is a machine, that we actually look at business as love and business as nature. And the improv really helped illuminate that. And the stand-up, I just love making people laugh. And then when I was teaching improv in the sustainability space, and the notice more was heavy. for people in that space, I was like, we need to bring a lens of lightness in here too, so that the noticing more doesn't spin them out. And that's where I brought both the comedy and the improv in.
Yeah. So, well, if you look back at your life, when did you discover you were funny? So you told me you were giggly, but when did you discover you could make things happen in the other direction, that you were funny and make people laugh?
Yeah. From a young age, my mother would complain that I made her laugh so hard she wet herself. And that was always like the bar of like, could I get there? Like, could I go like, oh, mom needs to go away for a second because of what the interaction that just happened. So I think that was an early indicator. Yeah.
Wow. What about in school?
In school, like, I think what helps is, well, I was kind of a loner at school. I didn't quite know how to fit in because I grew up moving around, and I was just very different from, like, I didn't want to go to the mall. I just didn't see the systems and stuff like that. But I had some friends that we would do, I was more into dancing at that point and would do dancing shows and actually, and comedy shows. So I liked watching Monty Python. John Cleese was amazing. But I didn't get like my first stand-up thing until I did the course in New York City. And that was in 1996.
Wow.
And it was so nice. I had this guy, Lee Frank, who I'm friends with on Facebook still. And he was teaching the class, and it ends in a show, right? And you're in this, I was in this like weird bar, and the only people in the audience were people about to go on stage, so they were completely ignoring me, and they were like working on their set and stuff like that, and I'm like saying my set, and I totally missed where I was in my set, and I said, oh my god, this is about my life and I don't remember what comes next, and I made my stand-up teacher laugh, and that was like, okay, like this is okay.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Well, digging a little more into that, so were there any kind of like self-beliefs or any mental barriers you had to overcome to do the work that you do today? What are things maybe you had to undo to be able to work in this way with people?
Yeah. I think sort of healing some of my own trauma. So I had some childhood trauma, and just being able to be more neutral in myself when I hold space for other people. And I've had a lovely therapist, and I had worked with specific people who really kind of helped me shift some of that. Actually, I think we're going to talk about Tolu, and actually the dust cloth principle would be really useful at this time if I could share.
Sure, go ahead.
So I shared with you that I met this amazing man named Tolu, with a difficult surname, but really an extraordinary soul, who was a master cleaner, and he was cleaning what cleaning means. And he had this program where I met him in Montreal, where he was having CEOs apprentice with his cleaners for 3 days to notice what comes up for them. And I noticed when I did that program, and I noticed that I got weirdly competitive with his existing cleaners. Like, I want to beat them, and I'm like, but I was also like noticing what I was doing up to at the same time. I was like, really, like, that's interesting. But I noticed this, just a physical thing that seems so simple, and it was really profound. Of when you dust things, if your dust cloth is filled with dust, you're just moving dust around. But if you have a clean dust cloth, you can clean the space. And that brought us some really interesting conversations about like, what's our practice to clean our inner dust cloth, so that we as facilitators, when we hold space, we're not bringing our own dust in, that we can really hold the space for what's happening in the room and not skew it based on kind of our own unresolved stuff.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up Tolu, because we were going to make our way to that topic. Yeah, so Tolu, let me see, Ilisanmi, I think is her name. Yeah. So he ran his cleaning company. So he cleaned floors and bathrooms, but he ran this company with like a lot of heart and imagination and craft and art. Talk about making business art. So tell me more about Tolu's understanding of cleaning and what it meant in a broader sense. What's your take or your memory of that?
He was such a magical being. Like, he's one of the few walking Buddhas, I feel like, that I've met in my life.
And Tolu passed away some years ago, so let's just kind of frame that for the audience. In 2018, 19, you said previously?
Something like that,
okay.
Yeah. It's still very surreal that he's not here, because he's really in my heart. He
lives on, yes.
Yeah.
So tell me.
he was such a master cleaner that when I would meet with him, I would cough. And my perception of what was happening was like inner dust from my soul was just coming out of my face just by being in his presence. So and I complained about that repeatedly to him, and it would just make him laugh. So he was just such a beautiful soul, and he realized that there's something about when you come in and you with a loving intention to clean the tangible, there's something that happens on the intangible plane. And vice versa. And I know right before his death, he was getting very interested in cleaning windows and the symbolism and the action of cleaning windows, and that windows were sort of how we perceive the outside, how the outside is able to perceive us, and how do we make that clear and clean. He started a cleaning company because he was getting an MBA at McGill, and he needed a way to get income for him and his wife, and he didn't want to poison himself because he didn't know about like the different toxic cleaning things. So he decided I'm just going to use, non-toxic natural things, which was a lovely thing. But then in the process of cleaning, he had this like real amazing insight of what it does to us when you come in and do it with presence and intention. And isn't it interesting that our image of cleaning stuff sometimes is pouring a bunch of toxic chemicals on something? He's like, that doesn't make any sense. And for him, cleaning became, how do we reveal the beauty of what is? Like that was, and so he was on a mission to clean what cleaning means. I think in our society, we want it like, oh, it's a cleaner or something. It's like, no, it's a cleaner. Like that is such a spiritually powerful thing to do. How do we raise up that beautiful action? And it also changes our connection with space. Like when you lovingly clean the space in office building, you see it completely differently. You would design it maybe differently because it's like, oh, why does the dust always like go into that? Like you would change how you design it so that the beauty can be revealed easily. Yeah.
That's so interesting. So the good people over at the House of Beautiful Business have a little 1 or 2 minute mini interview with Tolu, and he talks about what really needs the most cleaning is the intangible, like cleaning our relationships. And the first time I heard that really landed. I'm like, oh gosh, there's like deep truth to that. And like you're saying, right, cleaning the tangible to also clean the intangible. I mean, it really is like when we walk into a clean space, the energy, it does feel better for most people. This is very interesting. Do you remember, did you ever have any other conversations about, did he ever talk about any patterns he recognized in the CEOs that he paired up with his cleaners, like any feedback or changes or things that his business people reported back after going through his program?
I know there was a whole thing about status, about very interesting, like walking in as the CEO versus walking in as a cleaner. I know they had a very different perception of finding your way to work, even like that whole pattern changes. And and I don't know, like he didn't share too much other than that, just because I think it's very individual per the person that shows up. But I know he loved the dust cloth idea, and he was like, oh, how can we share this? How can we share this more broadly? And he was a big laugher as well. Like I also love to make him laugh. I don't think I made him incontinent with laughter, but I love to make him laugh because he was such a beautiful soul.
Oh my God, incontinent. So I can see there's going to be a Belina scale where there's a little toilet at the top. Like you have to go pee.
Ding, 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 ding.
As part of a design toolkit and as a means of discovery, it makes me think of something I remember starting to observe and kind of pattern match many years ago, where in working with nonprofits at the time as a funder, we just noticed that the leadership, even in spaces that were small, there was this kind of mental cognitive distance with the front line. And I think scarcely anybody ever talked to the frontline people, meaning the people at the front desk, the people who answer the phones, the people that are spend most contact hours with the people who they're serving. And those people have so many stories and observations and things to share, and it doesn't make it up to the consciousness, right? The attention of the leader. In fact, just last year, in two places, at a grocery chain where I shop and in an airline that I fly, I had moments where I was communicating some feedback to a staff person. And usually I try to approach it in a compassionate way, like, hey, I know you're here, you're doing your job, I'm just going to share this to send it up the chain. And the response I got from both people was, well, if you really want to express this, I recommend that you write corporate, because they don't listen to us. And specifically, the person at the grocery chain was saying, like, hey, yeah, we constantly have all these ideas, etc., and they don't listen to us. They go nowhere. So could you please... So that they're actually... It turns into... They're really asking, sincerely asking me to write corporate to see if there's some change. And then corporate, they'll go off and hire McKinsey for millions of dollars to try to figure out the problem so their staff can tell them in like 10 minutes. So it's coming back to Tolu and cleaning and using that as a process of discovery. That's so fantastic. I never thought of it that way. He's so genius. My goodness.
He also, like, all the people who came to work for him were like not cleaners usually. It was like poets and artists and different, like, and they did a beautiful job because they shared his vision, and they had this like attention that was very beautiful about this, like, this intention. How do we clean the space with love? Yeah.
So let's land back in the present. So we talked about the applied improv work that you do, and also we touched on the sustainable stand-up. Let's do a deeper dive into sustainable stand-up. So tell me, what exactly is that about, and what's that work about?
It's it links back to just noticing beautiful people and teaching them improv skills. So I work with like the Red Cross Climate Center and different groups like that, and noticing that the improv was great and it helped with collaboration and communication, but there's still this need to bring a lens of lightness into the work so that we can again think more expansively and just have a belly laugh and connect with people, and also to hold forums where different types of specialists could come in. Because like there would be like soil conferences and water conferences, but usually those two never got together. So my public course is the intention of, like, you just want to make the world a better place, and you have whatever lens you have, and then we all come together. And in helping each other through a 6-week course, and then we have a show, and then we have a debrief. It's doing lots of different things. And for me, it's actually not about the comedy, although the shows are wildly popular and it's like very hilarious. It's actually, how can I help those people when they're afraid to be connected, generous, and present? And if I can do that in this parachute jump of doing stand-up comedy for the first time, then they can bring that practice to looking at their inherently scary issues with the same thing, and also to find the lightness for themselves, like, so that they don't burn out, so that they can communicate it without shouting at potential allies. There's lots of different things that it does. And yet it's been about almost 9 years now, and I think 11 countries plus a bunch online as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, coming back to that sense of genuine shared laughter, I think there's very few other ways to build goodwill very quickly. You know, the laughter is just so powerful. So with these people who are working through sustainable stand-up, again, going back to pattern recognition, what are some common important shifts you observe people making on their journey to be funnier and connect with audiences in this more positive, loving way?
It's away from solemn. It's part of it. It's trusting that if they let go of the solemn ball, or it's almost like a trapeze, like the trapeze of humor, and especially and loving humor actually illuminates. I think people are worried that sometimes if they bring loving humor into an issue that they really care about, it makes it frivolous for the audience. And the space I try to hold is just like, actually it allows us to process it, especially with everything going on in the wars and the pandemic and we're so close to fight or flight that if we don't offer information in a way that we can process that doesn't kick off fight or flight, it's going to be blocked. So we're not going to be able to actually engage with the information, make wise action. And this loving humor kind of feels like that's how people shift, is like they get it, like, oh, like when I shout at people or when I'm like just trying to get it right, it doesn't have as much resonance. It doesn't, they don't have as much connection with the audience. And they're also not sharing of themselves. Like I've had so many people say like, oh, I should talk about like what my skin in the game is. You know what I mean? Like, not just like, here's a bunch of charts, bye. Like it's sort of, why do you on a human level care about that thing? And what do you want? Like, that's the other thing, is I hear so little in the space of like, what would be beautiful?
Yeah.
Like, it's not enough. I saw Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth, and it kind of pissed me off.
Those charts again.
Like, well, because I noticed what it did to my brain, and it's like, I just want to get into a Hummer and go shopping and like get a big gun. Like that, the information that he's giving me, that's the impact. Yeah. And that is the complete opposite of what we as humanity need to do at this. We need to collaborate. We need to love better solutions into being. We don't need to get into a Hummer and go shopping. But that was like the impact. And that's what got me into using improv for sustainability. But then this, like, watching what Jon Stewart did with The Daily Show and does with The Daily Show and stuff. And he does it so masterfully.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, actually more John Oliver has like a little bit of an edge to him when he delivers the information, because I think he's just also, there's only so much darkness you can transmute as an individual, and I think sometimes that builds up in him. Yeah. When I teach groups, it's the most powerful we can, and easy for beginners actually, is to be loving. If you're trying to be edgy, it's too easy to get it wrong and alienate people or piss people off or whatever. Like, being loving is like the safest, most universal path for us to be able to hear what they have to say. So that's a shift. Yeah.
That's so interesting. It's bringing up a handful of things for me. I did a interview recently in an episode I released recently called Beauty at Work. I interviewed a sociologist. And in that interview, I threw social science people under the bus, which I'm about to do again. And that's just to say that in social sciences and other disciplines, I think we're trained in the art of the critique, but we're not really trained in model building, and model building that really connects with and appeals to people. So then we kind of are stuck on the analysis, which then is often angry and catastrophizing. And I used to be that person. I'm still that person in some ways, but I realize, gosh, that just creates more polarization, and it doesn't really connect with anybody other than the other social science people that just want to complain. So I reduce this in a very crass way, that we're just taught to be complainers instead of...
as academia does that.
Yes.
To a lot of people.
Yes.
It, like, as a thing of let's point out all like everything that's wrong in an argument. It's like, or we could, like, that's a little dispiriting when you're on the receiving end of it. Are there other ways to...
But it's the opposite of what you do in many ways, because you're saying that you're opening doors to possibility with your work, basically.
Yeah.
Right. And to create solutions and kind of envision something different. And the analysis just really it's just stuck in the same story of, well, this is the way it is, and these are the things that are wrong with the way it is. But that's just really embittering.
I mean, and that's also why I brought improv into this space, as I saw way too much of that going on around sustainability. There was a group, I was a co-chair of the Association of Management, Education and Development for a million years ago. And we had a sustainability group, and there's some lovely people in it, but they were getting stuck in like, what is the exact definition of sustainability? And it was like, no, like we get... I also dropped out of a course because I was doing all these talks suddenly on sustainability, and I'm like, maybe I should take a course on it. And it was at Open University, and the first assignment was basically like, read a bunch of stuff and share how screwed we are. And I'm like, no, like I'm not going to read 40 pages and then just recite back gloom. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Because I also met some activists who felt like they were almost getting energy from the fact that they knew we were all going to die, and like kind of it was a very weird egoic thing. And there's so many games, psychological games, that are unhelpful. And I think a lot of it is we haven't dealt with our own death, and we are conflating climate change and death. And so sometimes I've asked, like, raise your hand if it wasn't for the climate change, you'd live forever. Do you know what I mean? Just as a way to kind of like tease those two apart, because I feel like our messy response to climate and to social issues and stuff it's that dust of unresolved dust of our own mortality.
Yeah.
And so if we can clean that, we can actually respond more cleanly and with more joy and with more insight and vision.
I interviewed early on this podcast, comedian Rajiv Satyal. And in that conversation, he made a distinction that it's just stuck with me. So he used to work at Procter & Gamble, at P&G, and then made his way to just being a full-time comic. And he talked about in this time where he used to go out to get laughs. And then he said he switched mindset at some point, and he kind of switched from getting laughs to giving laughs. And
wait a second. Are you sure is that what he said? Because Michael Jr. has a complete quote.
I don't know.
Well, he does this thing that I give in.
He embraced that anyway in his own comedy. And he does like to quote people. So maybe he was quoting somebody, but he was practicing it. And so he was just sharing how the energy was different in the room. And he was doing the same thing. He's just, kind of telling jokes and doing his thing. But he said it was just very different energy in the room for the audience and for himself. And there's something about being generous and generosity and kind of embracing that spirit of, am I taking or am I giving in this interaction? And I think you're touching on that. You're circling that concept where we haven't like called it out as in plain words just as right now, but something very powerful about that. And I think there's, again, the self-righteousness that the activist can have, like, well, I'm a learned person and I'm here to enlighten you with charts and whatnot.
Or even I'm the consultant. Like, it's my job. I'm the expert. It's my job to know the answer to
Hey, listen,
unhelpful.
And I live that, so it's something I fight in myself. So I'm including myself under the bus, just like everybody else that I'm talking about.
You're running yourself over.
For sure. What advice would you give a leader who is struggling with a disengaged team? What might be a place to start and head in a more useful direction?
I worked with a fabulous guy named Paul Z. Jackson, and he's a rock star both in applied improv and solution focus. And I think what came to mind as a solution focus question, something like, when have you seen them engaged even a little bit? Notice what the conditions were there. But also talk to them and really listen. And not be defensive about what comes out, but really listen about what they need, what they want.
Yeah. Just find the right energy and feed it.
Yeah, nice.
Well, and it does take a lot of listening. And by listening, we mean really like full sensory attention. Listening with our bodies.
And it takes vulnerability, right? Like it does. Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah. Belina, the name of this project is Making Business Art. What comes up for you when you hear that phrase?
There's an image of sort of a very gray office, like cubicle outline, like image of like a cubicle office, and just breathing colors and life and connection and plants and butterflies and stuff into that grayness. And an invitation to honor beauty and difference and expression in business, which unfortunately all too often is missing.
Yeah. I've been sitting with this notion that we become the stories we tell.
Yeah.
What do you make of that, and what kind of stories are you telling that transports us into sets us on a different path?
Sometimes people have trouble shifting to the loving comedy And one of the invitations I make is, imagine you're a loving, eternal God who knows that, like, at the end it's going to be fine. Like, in the middle, right now it's messy, but it's going to be fine. What do you see from that perspective?
Oh, wow.
And that often expands things enough for people to actually start being playful.
I'm going to sit with that. I just have a sense that's like a daily exercise that will be ever unfolding. Wow. That's a really useful frame. Do you have any other thoughts about how we might infuse our business and lives with more real connection and genuine shared laughter?
I think it is there's this idea of the cosmic giggle that keeps coming to me, that has come to me for a really long time, of like, there's a cosmic giggle. In one level, what we're doing is hilarious. like if we are eternal beings or whatever, we just keep coming back to learn stuff, learn about love, learn about what is not love, and all of that stuff. Like, a lot of what's going on is hilarious in a bigger context. Like, why would we do that? Why would we have wars? Why would we have all of this stuff going on, this nonsense going on? And it is nonsense. And I think it's kind of like humanity's, like we talked about us being solemn in different places and knowing that it's not the right thing, but like, so sometimes we have to sit in what we're not to realize what we are. And it feels like that's kind of what we're doing as a big group, of really sitting in the extreme of what we're not, what's not loving, what's not honoring each other. And I'm just hoping that the pendulum is going to shift soon, so that we can really just know we are nature. Like, we're part of the big Gaia family. We are all connected. None of the physical differences matter at all. It just, I like to sort of think of the universe as a bunch of sock puppets, but like, it's all like the same sheep, but we're all like, I believe I'm Ezekiel. And so it's like, how do we remember that we're all bits of the universe?
Yeah. It's funny because it doesn't matter, but then it does matter. I mean, you can make it matter in a sense of play, of, well, let's use our differences to create something instead of the opposite. Instead of creating suffering, like, let's create something, I don't know, very joyful. I love that. That's a great place to land our conversation, Belina. So I have a lightning round questions that sometimes I warn people that they might, one or two might seem a little silly, but I don't think that doesn't apply in this context. So the first question is, can you describe your closet and what state it's in?
Yes. So I have a wardrobe, not a closet, because that's what Berlin does with their apartments. But I have a mixture of, like, I can't work out what season it is yet, because the spring is coming, but it's still, so I have like winter and a few warm clothes thing. I'm proud that I folded the clothes in like the horizontal spaces, but for some reason where the shoes go is like, there's way too many things that are not shoes that are on top of the shoes in that area. So I have one section that needs love, but the rest of it is okay.
And so is there some approach to the organization, or it's just free range and organic closet?
It's every once in a while, it's like, okay, I'm going to take everything out and fold it on the bed and then put it back in there. And I haven't reached that stage of angst yet.
Oh, good. Yeah. Or anything else?
I just read a book called White Holes by, I have it right here, Carlo Rovelli. And it's very interesting. It's from a physicist's perspective, like black holes and white holes, and what does that do with time and matter and space? And he shares the story in a really accessible, beautiful way. And I love his musings with time. That time is not how we think about it. Like, it can be different things instead of what the story we tell ourselves about time.
That's super interesting. I'd never even thought of the concept of a white hole. Like, is it a metaphor, or it's like a physics phenomenon?
He thinks it's a physics phenomenon. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Okay.
Phenomena.
What is something that inspires you?
Well, loving the conversations like this. The cosmic giggle can come through us and be healing. Even in really hard circumstances, even like with the John Cleese of, even at a funeral, there's something about the cosmic giggle, there's something about that giggle energy that can be really healing. And I love that's part of the mix in our lives.
Oh, I love that. What is a band or song that you must play during a solo road trip?
It shifted. So when I was doing my round the world for
Mm-hmm.
my book thing it was Macy Gray's Beauty in the World.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Ted Lasso. I love the show Ted Lasso. And there's a song called Hello, which is very sort of bouncy and like it's basically playing with serious and solemn, because in the song there's a guy who's clearly trying to romance her and she's like I just came to say hello. Like, I'm not here for that. And I find it very empowering. So I really like that song.
What do you want to see more of in the world?
Yeah. I think just love.
Mm.
Like, just letting... Almost like the Care Bears. Like there's a Care Bear with a heart. Having like all of us kind of have access that heart.
Yes.
Like
The Care Bear stare. That's great. That's just lovely. Well, Belina, can you share with the listeners what do you have going on and where can people find you? And why should people look you up?
Why should... So many things. If any of what we talked about sounded interesting and feels like it could be useful for the organization that they work with, or personally, so I do public courses and I do organizational stuff. I have mafic.com and sustainablestandup.com. I'm shifting to a website I'm in the process of shifting to a website called Giggling with Earth, which won't come as a surprise based on our Giggling with Earth. So I'm going to try to use that as my umbrella. And I'm getting more and more interested in changing bigger games. So I've been changing kind of in my own small way what stand-up does in the world, that it can be really loving and stuff like that. I want to change bigger games, like how do we engage with complexity to get better and more beautiful sustainable projects out there in the world, and more social projects out there in the world. So watch this space if that's of interest to you, of like how do we engage complexity and joy and collaboration more effectively. Come on by and let's have a chat.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for our conversation today and for just sharing a laugh together and making me giggle. It's been really nice. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a delight. Thank you.
Wonderful. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.